soup and bread, please.
The one who appeared before me at the soup kitchen was my emaciated 6-year-old granddaughter. It had been 2 years since my relationship with my son and his wife had soured, and I hadn't seen my granddaughter since. She had completely changed. When I immediately contacted my son and his wife, I heard a carefree voice on the other end of the line.
Right now? We're at a fancy sushi restaurant with the family.
After discovering the shocking truth, I decided to take action against my son and his wife. I am Nancy. I had been living alone since my husband passed away a few years ago. I had always loved helping others more than anything. So, after retiring at 65, I started volunteering at a local soup kitchen, supporting people in need of food. Seeing their smiles as they received soup and bread somehow gave me strength. Besides that, my only source of joy was my 35-year-old son, Jeff, and his family. They lived about a 10-minute drive away and occasionally visited my house. Especially my first granddaughter, Michelle, was incredibly adorable. I was grateful for my fulfilling days, but there was one thing that always bothered me.
Mom, look at this. I bought another new model of watch.
Thanks to Jeff, we're making a lot of money. The fancy French meal we had the other day was delicious.
One day, my son's family came to visit. Watching Jeff lounging on the sofa and his wife, Catherine, I couldn't help but smile wryly. What worried me was their personality. Jeff had always been vain, constantly asking for branded watches and clothes since his student days. After he started working in the TV industry in his early 20s, this trait only intensified. He began to boast about his possessions and purchases whenever he had the chance. I thought marriage might temper this behavior, but it seemed Catherine was the same way. Even more troubling was how their personalities affected their parenting.
Oh, by the way, Nancy, Michelle was featured in a magazine again.
When I looked at the phone screen she handed me, there was a picture of 3-year-old Michelle on the cover of a baby clothing magazine. They had enrolled their child in an agency and were having her work as a baby model. Of course, having my adorable granddaughter featured in a magazine was something to be happy about, and from their visits, I knew they genuinely loved Michelle. However, their approach still worried me.
Mom, you should stop doing that volunteer work that doesn't pay. There's no benefit in associating with poor people.
Hey, you shouldn't be bragging like that. There are many things in this world more important than money and status.
Oh, Mom, you always love your idealistic talk.
Even though I scolded him, Jeff just laughed it off and grabbed some snacks. I had told him many times since he was little, but my way of thinking never got through to him. Is it really something to get so worked up about? There were times when I felt frustrated that my words didn't resonate with him at all, but by this point, I was starting to give up on correcting his thinking. His habit of bragging was a flaw, but it wasn't as if they were doing anything wrong. They were just enjoying the money they earned. However, my lenient thinking at that time would later lead to a great tragedy. The change came when my granddaughter turned 4. Until then, my son's family had visited regularly, but suddenly, they started avoiding contact with me. Even when we managed to arrange a meeting, there was a tense atmosphere, and Catherine, in particular, always seemed irritated. The atmosphere at home was far from pleasant. One day, when I had prepared a cake for Michelle, whom I hadn't seen in a long time, Catherine suddenly yelled at me,
I can't believe you're trying to feed her that sugar bomb. Our child is a model, you know.
Her anger didn't subside easily, and since Michelle was completely frightened, the visit ended abruptly. From that day on, I couldn't see my son's family anymore. Although Jeff would answer my calls, he would coldly brush me off, saying,
"I'm too busy with work to visit. Stop being so persistent."
They continued to find excuses to refuse my visits, and before I knew it, 2 years had passed. I thought I had properly apologized to Catherine, but do they really hate me that much? I eventually gave up calling them, thinking that anything I did would only make things worse. However, Jeff, Catherine, and Michelle were still my precious family. I continued to think about them in my heart, dreaming of the day we could meet again. And then, this feeling unexpectedly reached the heavens. It was an especially cold winter day, and I was busy distributing soup and bread with my fellow soup kitchen volunteers. Suddenly, there was a commotion around us. When I looked at the line, I saw a gaunt little girl standing among the familiar faces. Does she have some kind of situation? Seeing the child in thin clothing, despite the cold, made my heart ache. In all my years of volunteering, I had never seen a child in the line. Finally, when she stood before me, she weakly said,
Soup and bread, please.
Looking closely at her face, I gasped. Though she had changed a lot from my memory, I recognized her round eyes and the mole near her eye. Are you Michelle?
Grandma?
At that moment, the girl, now 6 years old, widened her eyes in surprise, and I was left speechless. I wished it were a mistake, but my once adorable Michelle had become a pitiful sight over the years we hadn't seen each other. What happened? How did it come to this? I was shocked and rushed to her, but Michelle looked troubled and lowered her head. However, I couldn't leave her like this. For the time being, I gave her some warm soup and bread and decided to take her in. To understand the situation, I contacted Jeff's cell phone for the first time in a while. Hello, Jeff? Where are you?
Whoa, you scared me. Right now? We're at a fancy sushi restaurant with the family.
To my surprise, a carefree voice came from the other end of the line. What? But here.
Oh, the next sushi is here. Sorry, if you need something, call me later. Oh, and we can't meet.
Before I could explain the situation, the call was cut off mercilessly. I stood there in shock, still holding my phone. Jeff said he was with the family, but right in front of me, eating soup, was undoubtedly Michelle. And her appearance was far from that of a child from a wealthy family. What's going on? Just as I was feeling lost, another coincidence occurred. Suddenly, a man said from behind me,
Excuse me.
Startled, I turned around to see a man who regularly lined up at the soup kitchen. And then, he uttered shocking words while looking at my granddaughter. No way. As I listened to his story, I felt the blood drain from my face. His story was hard to believe, but if it were true, sadly, everything would make sense.
Mom. Dad.
As soon as the man finished speaking, Michelle, who had just finished her soup, started to cry. Seeing her tears, I felt a rage boiling inside me. I can't forgive this. I will make them pay for their sins, I vowed, holding my sobbing granddaughter tightly. The next morning, while watching Michelle sleep soundly at my house, the doorbell suddenly rang. After bringing her home, I had fed her to her heart's content and put her to bed. Seeing her so genuinely happy, despite not doing anything special, was heartwarming. From now on, I will protect your happiness, I whispered, stroking her cheek as she slept peacefully. I took a deep breath and headed to the door.
Mom, I saw your email. What are you thinking?
I can't believe you took her without permission. This is a crime.
As expected, there stood my furious son and his wife. It was no surprise, as I had sent them an email late the previous night saying, I have taken Michelle. They probably noticed my message in the morning and hurried over to my house. However, they had no right to blame me. Don't be rude. I just took Michelle into my care.
You're so stubborn. You just wanted to see your granddaughter, didn't you?
Then where were you yesterday, leaving her behind? When I snapped back at them, they immediately became flustered and averted their eyes. Growing impatient with their evasive behavior, I took a step closer to them. You can't answer, can you? Because you've been neglecting Michelle all this time. The day before, after eating some soup and calming down, Michelle had slowly explained everything to me. According to her, she had been successful as a baby model, but as she grew older, the work stopped coming. Shockingly, my son and his wife had lost interest in her because of this. The reduced visits and Catherine's anger over the cake incident were due to their frustration over their child's declining career. You've been out having fun without her all this time, haven't you? I glared at them, and Catherine bit her lip in frustration. Apparently, they had been treating their daughter as if she didn't exist, indulging in luxury, just the two of them. Meanwhile, Michelle had been surviving on instant noodles, pastries, and kindergarten lunches. She had learned about the soup kitchen from TV and decided to line up there. Just because she earned money as a baby model doesn't mean it's guaranteed. You are unfit parents. The situation was so tragic that I raised my voice. I didn't want to believe it, but to them, Michelle was no different from a branded accessory. However, it seemed my son and his wife felt no guilt.
If you don't work, you don't eat, right? We did nothing wrong.
What we were doing was educating her. It's not something you should interfere with, Mom.
Instead of reflecting, they started to get defensive. Their irresponsible words as parents made me sigh as I glared at them. They had no idea, but I had a final card to play against them. If you say she wasn't working, then neither are you.
What? I earn money, that's why we can go to fancy sushi restaurants.
I know everything. Are you saying your job is to deceive people? They never expected their misdeeds to be exposed. For the first time, they both looked genuinely shocked. The man who had spoken to me during the soup kitchen the previous day had revealed my son and his wife's wrongdoings. He had attended a suspicious seminar and lost all his money, ending up penniless. According to him, he had even seen Michelle at the seminar venue. After a little investigation, Jeff, I found out you left the TV industry a long time ago. My words made my son freeze. When I called his former workplace, I learned that Jeff had been fired for misconduct. After losing his job, my son and his wife had used their former TV industry credentials to start a talent seminar. They charged high fees for courses on how to succeed on TV, which was essentially a scam. Coincidentally, the man in the soup kitchen line was one of their victims. He remembered Michelle waiting by the seminar classroom while her parents gave their lectures. To bring my son and his wife to justice, I had asked him for a favor. I've already reached out to the other victims. They plan to see you soon. I stepped closer to Jeff, whose face was turning pale. My plan for their punishment was to cover the victims' legal fees using my husband's inheritance and prepare to sue my son and his wife.
Why are you siding with them, Mom? And using Dad's inheritance for this?
When a child does something wrong, it's the parent's responsibility to clean up the mess. I sighed deeply at my flustered son. My son and his wife, who had never faced their roles as parents, might not understand, but a child's wrongdoing is also the parent's responsibility. That's why I had no hesitation in using my husband's inheritance. In fact, I'm sure he would agree that this was the right way to use it from heaven. Although I never expected to be cleaning up after my son at this age. Disciplining a child who has done wrong is also a parent's duty. You will atone for what you've done. As I glared at the two of them, now completely pale, they began to tremble. They had likely assumed that the victims, being poor, couldn't do anything.
What? What? We're going to be sued now? I didn't hear anything about this. What should we do?
I don't know. Mom, please, stop this. I'll apologize, okay?
I coldly brushed off Jeff, who was desperately trying to grab my hand, and reached for the doorknob. It's far too late for apologies. Accept your punishment and become a decent person. Before my son and his wife could say anything, I slammed the door shut. By pushing them into the abyss, I fulfilled my final role as Jeff's mother. In the end, my son and his wife were sued by the victims and arrested for fraud. Naturally, their seminar was shut down, and they were ordered to pay a total of $30,000 in damages. Moreover, their names were publicly reported in the news, making it nearly impossible for them to reintegrate into society even after being released. Jeff and Catherine's lives turned into a nightmare of debt, the opposite of their ideal. Additionally, an investigation into their home environment revealed their lack of parenting ability, and I was granted custody of Michelle. Now, I have cut ties with Jeff and live a peaceful life with my granddaughter. Every time I see Michelle's beautiful smile as she helps with the soup kitchen, I am determined to protect her for the rest of my life.
How did you like this story? Please subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.